Southeast Asia startup ecosystem is booming, but a shift is underway. While traditional models prioritize a rapid scaling and revenue growth, a new wave of entrepreneurs are focused on building ethical and sustainable business that align with community values, especially halal principles. As the market matures, the challenges is clear. How can startups remain profitable while staying true to their ethical values and contributing positively to their communities? And today we explore how startups can balance revenue pressures with ethical integrity, the role of accelerator programs like HASAN.VC in guiding these ventures, and how understanding local dynamics can help businesses grow sustainable. And for that, I welcome you, our guest, Umar Munshi, the managing partner, HASAN.VC. I want to say thank you very much, Umar, for joining me. Firstly, you want to take a look at the main challenge, especially for the startups. What are some of the issues, challenges that they have encountered when trying to achieve profitability while staying true to their ethics and halal principles?
Right, thank you. Thank you for having me here. And maybe I'll start off by sharing that in our perspective, in our understanding, upholding and fulfilling halal principles is not necessarily something that affects success and profitability. Right? Although there would be a case, or sometimes there would be cases where certain products or certain markets or certain services that may not comply or may not be aligned with halal principles. For those, the startups and companies may have to not be involved or not serve that particular market. But in general, we see that halal principles are generally ethical principles that can be universally applied. And when businesses subscribe to such ethics, this actually creates more value and more sustainability, and potentially it can also help in the growth aspect of the startup.
Umar, maybe you can share with us, are there any successful example that startup entrepreneurs have successfully balanced it, and what are the key decisions or the key approaches that enable them to succeed?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There are actually many companies. The thing about halal is you can brand yourself as halal, or you can be silent about it and just ensure that you subscribe to halal principles, which, as I mentioned earlier, in most cases would be considered universal. Now, what we see and in our experience and what we share to the startups that we invest in is that look at the substance, the value of what you're offering, and communicate it effectively. Right? Whether it's the ethical halal component or it is more on the business value, that communication is key, right? Not just asserting halal, but why halal or what about halal. Yeah? So in that case, it could be something that creates benefit to society, something that prevents harm, something that brings more. For example, halal, something that's halal can also be more inclusive because you can have those of the Muslim faith as well as those of other faiths involved.
Mm-hmm. And Umar, what are the common pitfalls that halal businesses face when scaling especially, and how can they avoid compromising their values in the pursuit of growth amid uncertainties?
Yeah, I think a major challenge which we are trying to solve is that Malaysia, although Islamic finance is very developed, it's number one Islamic finance, Islamic economy or halal hub in the world, but there's almost no or very little halal VC. So when halal companies want to scale, they necessarily need halal funding as well, right? That's where we see that there is a challenge or there is a gap in the market. There is this lack of halal VC, halal investors for a long time. However, at the same time, the silver lining is that we can see today that even major global VC brands and franchises are starting to invest in halal startups. So while it is still a challenge, steps are being taken towards solving it.
And talking about VC, Umar, we know that the recent news about tightening the VC funding environment, what are the challenges that you have observed in the industries which are impacting most of the fundraising?
Maybe I can identify two factors or two challenges. One is a general lack of exposure and understanding of VC by stakeholders. When I say stakeholders, I include the public as well. Right? As we are aware, there's some high-profile negative cases recently and in the past. And the thing about VC is that it's a very unique, I would say maybe counterintuitive kind of investment where you expect most of your investments to actually fail and only a small portion of it to actually give you your returns. So that is something that not many are familiar with or comfortable with, but that is something that is inherent within the whole concept and approach of startups and VC investment, right? So that understanding needs to be enhanced so that there can be more harmony and more synergy in the ecosystem. Yeah, and yeah, the other aspect I believe is the mindset towards failure and risk taking, because that is the name of the game in venture capital. While there is definitely a duty of care and responsibility towards investors when founders receive investment, but at the same time, investors need to go in with their eyes open, and the stakeholders need to understand that the reality is that the chances of success is not usually very high, and that small portion of the companies that we invest in that do make it big, that's where the VC value is really unlocked.
And also factoring that VC is becoming more competitive, do you think it's going to be very hard, or it's going to become harder for ethical business to secure investment, and how do they overcome all of these barriers?
Yeah. On the contrary, I think and I believe that the opportunity today for startup entrepreneurship, technology entrepreneurship, it's actually much more open and much more accessible to entrepreneurs because of the way that things have become democratized in terms of technology. A non-tech background person can start a tech business, right? And a techie person can learn to do business. And today we have, of course, tools like AI and so on that make it much, much cheaper and much easier to start a business. So I think the barriers to starting a business has gone down very, very significantly. And that makes it more capital efficient. You don't need so much money. And so, VCs or whatever capital stock is available can be spread out to a lot more companies. So I think and I believe and I hope that it's actually going to be easier moving forward to raise funds, but the funds will be smaller because you don't need so much money to run a business.
And that is a situation from entrepreneurs and venture capitals. And in Malaysia, probably we can relate it into the global context. What are some of the trends you anticipate will shape the future of venture capital in Malaysia in the coming years?
Right. Two very clear trends that we can see. There are many, but maybe I'll highlight these two. One is the trend towards having businesses that are more people-focused, human-focused, society or community-focused. These benefit a larger group of people, right? You can call it impact investment, socially responsible investment, and so on. And this is where the halal aspect also comes into play, because the halal paradigm and framework is something that is very well developed and well set, and Muslims, non-Muslims alike can subscribe to that. The other that I see is related to my earlier point, where you can start and grow a business with very few people and very few resources. So this kind of, maybe you can call it micro entrepreneurship, although we're not talking about microfinance, we're talking about startups. You can have very small, very lean startups that can do big things and reach a certain scale before it needs to raise significant funds.
That is also the trends in the coming years for Malaysia to take a look on, and if I'm going to bring to a larger context, especially within the international, we can see, given the global economics uncertainty, do you see any shift in the investor preference? Are they more keen on ethical or sustainable business model?
Yes, definitely. I mean, as the world changes and continues to change, and the speed of change is only accelerating, right? Consumer preferences change, business preferences change, and the lens of doing things or subscribing to businesses or products, which has ethics and morals that are aligned to our own values, that has become so prominent and so important today with the BDS movement and so on. So, necessarily, startups need to move in that direction, and investors will also match that trend. We've really seen that happening around the world. Malaysia, I feel, is a very suitable hub, a very suitable place for such ethical startups to be born.
Given about the venture capital trends in Malaysia and the global trends, and also I want to take a look on the governments, a role of the governments. How can the policy we play part in shaping the trends, and how should the startups prepare for any of regulatory changes?
All right. It's always a little bit challenging, I guess, for the government to really get involved in startups. But it definitely needs to happen, right? And in Malaysia, there's so much support from the government. It's really quite amazing. Because for us, we work with startups in many different countries in the region, and Malaysia is definitely up there in terms of support in general. I think what can be enhanced or improved is more engagement at the grassroots levels, and also a mindset that you want new people, you want new challenges, right? You want a new type of people involved, or new type of institutions involved, right? So the so-called traditional or typical channels in which government fund, government support trickles down and reaches the masses, I think there needs to be a little bit more flexibility and openness to have different people and different entities involved. Because as I mentioned earlier on, the mindset in VC is very different, and the value they can unlock in VC with that different mindset is very, very significant.
And Umar, I also want to hear a little bit about your advice on what will you give to startups, founders and even entrepreneurs in fundraising while upholding their ethical values, especially because we want to get it right. How can founders, entrepreneurs ensure they attract the right kind of investment, especially that aligns with their ethical values, and particularly in industries that might not prioritize or consider all of this aspect?
Yeah, this is it can be very tricky because myself, I'm a founder, an entrepreneur for more than 20 years before I became an investor, a VC. Yeah, okay. So I've been in that. I've been wearing that hat for most of my career, most of my business life, and it is very, very tricky sometimes, right? Definitely, you should, as a founder, make it clear what your principles are, what your preferences are, what's your stand, what's your culture, in your deck, in your presentation, in the material that you share with your investor, right? So that the investor can benchmark and understand that you are this kind of company, or this is your preference and your approach, and that should be able to help you attract the right kind of investors, more than those that you may not want. But at the same time, it's always tricky to know, upfront, to try and figure out whether the investor is right for you. And in a startup environment, sometimes, especially today, the startups are chasing the investors, right? So my suggestion would be, take it, fundamentally in a way that you understand what you're getting into. Don't just get excited when you have an offer for money, or a VC is interested in you, but try to look at that VC's background, who they've invested in, who are the people behind the VC or the investor, before you take the step and receive their money.
In a very highly competitive fundraising environment, what strategies, what kind of innovative approach can be used by the founders, entrepreneurs to build a very strong ethical value that resonates with the investors?
So indeed, as you pointed out, it is currently very, very competitive when it comes to raising funds, right? Or in other words, it's quite challenging, it's quite difficult. A few things that founders can do. One is to really focus and zoom in on the key value proposition that you provide in the specific context of solving your problem, solving the problem for your customer. That's very, very critical. A lot of times, startups are trying to solve a problem that may not really exist or that people are not willing to pay to get solved. So there's a very basic fundamental thing that in general, all startup founders would do well to remind yourselves, and I also remind myself about that a lot. The second thing is capital efficiency and sustainability. What I mean by that is show that you can create value and, if possible, even generate revenue. And best, if you can even do your business in a way that you can generate more revenue than your costs, meaning your cash flow positive. If you can do that at an early stage or at a young stage, then that will actually set you apart, right? There is a trade-off sometimes between trying to grow as fast as you can and looking after your bottom line, right? But if you can strike that balance, and if you can show investors that I have reached this point, I don't need money to survive, but I would like your investment so I can go to another level, then that is something that investors would be interested in, because it shows that you can reach some point of stability even without additional external capital, and that will put you in a different category, right? So it's not easy, but it's something that we have seen happen a lot. In fact, this year we invested in 10 companies, half of them, almost half from Malaysia, and the rest from Indonesia and other countries. And most of them at pre-seed, which is early stage, almost sustainable, and some are already cash flow positive. So I was very surprised and happily surprised to see this, and that's also why we chose to invest in them.
And definitely, you've said that it's not easy, but it's possible. And we know that from easy to possible, that also made it happen is also from the support of accelerator programs like HASAN.VC. And how can we understand that accelerator programs like HASAN.VC assist startups in navigating local market conditions while ensuring they maintain their ethical practices?
Right. Every accelerator has its own strength, and there are many, many accelerator programs out there. So you need to see, what's the potential value you can gain when you apply for an accelerator. And for Hasan, maybe I can highlight two things. One, the unique content and the trainers and speakers that we bring to our accelerator program from Malaysia and from outside Malaysia. The focus is, of course, on business principles, fundamentals, scaling up, and so on. But very much so, we also embed the Islamic worldview, in this case, of doing good, of barakah, or having blessings in what you do. Because when we do something that brings benefit to others, it circulates benefit in that sense, right? So that's a very unique and important part of our content. The second one that I want to highlight is the community. Right? So by virtue of our positioning and our content and our concept, which is Hasan means good. The word Hasan means good. So we're here to do good. We're here to help startups do good commercially and also from an ethical point of view. So that attracts founders and community members that think in a similar way. So when you join our accelerator, or when you are accepted into our accelerator, then you are part of this wider community, and that peer support and that those relationships and bonds that we develop over time is something that creates tremendous value for a lot of our founders.
As the managing director, as one of the accelerator programs, maybe you can share the experience of the journey. What are some of the common ethical dilemmas that most of the entrepreneur startups face in the local markets, and how HASAN.VC has tailored its support? Probably we can see tailor the support to startups so they can maintain ethical standards without sacrificing their market competitiveness.
Yes. So again, I don't think there is a trade-off per se between being ethical, being halal, and commercial strength or viability. In fact, we believe that it comes together. Nonetheless, there are definitely challenges in trying to be ethical, right? Sometimes there are opportunities for, sort of easy money or quick wins that may not be too ethical, right? So then for those kind of opportunities, ethical startups will have to miss them and let go of them. But I would say that, although they may be seen to be opportunities in the short term, but in the long term, most likely it's not going to bring benefit to the startup itself, right? So while there's a little bit of this kind of loss, but I think the loss is outweighed by the long-term benefit of being true and ethical. Now, so with that said, startups really need to dig deep, and founders need to always have front and center the reason for their existence and the reason for them doing this. And we see that most founders that come to us, they have a much deeper reason for what they're doing and why they're doing it. It's not just to make money, but it's also to leave, in many cases, to leave a legacy. And there's a mindset that we try to share also with our founders. You are here to build your business for future generations, right? Whether your business lasts a very long time or not is out of our control. You can only try your best. But with that mindset of building a generational business, then naturally you will have principles intact.
And we know it's not only the founders, the entrepreneurs, and even the startups are facing challenges or regulatory changes. And we know that accelerator programs like HASAN.VC also face unique regulatory challenges. Probably you can share with us, how do you address these regulatory changes that faced by halal business, especially in different countries of Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I think maybe in Islamic finance specifically, right? When you have startups that are in fintech, there would be some potential difficulty in going into different markets that may have differentiated Sharia principles or frameworks. But the fundamentals remain the same. So if you're not going to very, technical and tricky areas, then generally what we see is that a startup can quite easily expand to other countries or serve other countries based on the basic halal framework. Usually there's no issue there, right? Unless, for example, Islamic banks, where different countries have very, very strict and very, very specific ways of doing things, then it could be more challenging. But for startups, so far, what we see is there is no big issue, there's no big challenge. And outside of finance, especially, something that's halal is generally accepted as halal in most parts of the world.
Are there any, we can say, accelerator programs should integrate into their offerings, such as mentorships or even partnership with the key halal certifications bodies?
Yeah, I think that's something that we've always tried to do, and it's very important. The halal ecosystem, especially regulators and bodies, I see, especially in the last few years, right, we see that they have become much more open and much more welcoming to innovations, to dealing with new parties, new ideas, new technology. Pre-pandemic, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it was very, very tough. The gap in the way things were viewed is very, very significant. But that has gone away. It's largely gone away. And I commend, for example, the different religious authorities in the states, in Malaysia, because we see that they are very actively welcoming such change. And startups and founders are also actively reaching out to sharing and educating the stakeholders so that there's more alignment and there's more comfort, right? This year, and especially, I can't mention too much in terms of projects that we are aware of, but next year there are going to be a lot of, I would say, breakthrough projects where the religious authorities as well as startups are working together hand in hand.
With the growing emphasis on ethical consumerism, maybe you can share with us, where do you see the halal startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia over the next 5 to 10 years, Umar?
All right. Very important question, because it's not just about consuming ethically, but it's about producing ethically as well, right? Because we are here working on the startups, the producers, the businesses that are creating products and providing services. So we know today that there is a need for a much more ethical way of doing business and products and services that come out of these businesses. Southeast Asia, with Malaysia as the hub for the Islamic economy, we see that it's a very suitable source or region for production. When I say production here, it's not manufacturing, it's startups, right? So producing technology solutions from here is something that has regional and global potential because we have many advantages, right? We have robust ecosystem, we have talent, our cost structure is significantly lower than, for example, the GCC, the Middle East, and in the West. So we can produce good products here. We have a good market. We can test, iterate, and enhance and improve our product or offering. And then from there, it can go overseas. And we have seen, a lot of such connections and bridges starting to be built. Right? It's still early days, but we can see that happening. Specifically, we see it between Malaysia and Saudi, for example, also with Qatar, right? So there is this kind of bridges being built and this kind of cross-border business happening, especially in the startup world.
And how can halal startup position themselves to not only meet the demand of the current, we can say current situation, but also anticipate in the future shift in the ethical consumer trends?
All right. So this part is very important, right? Because for startups, the approach is, or the approach that we propagate is, you need to be very, very sensitive to the needs of your customers and your market, and to be able to quickly adjust to serve the market, right? So ethical consumerism has been here for a very long time, but in the past 1 year especially, it has been booming due to, let's just say, geopolitics. And this may accelerate because things are not getting better. So, for a startup, it's really about pushing it out there. For example, there is a fintech app in the UK, right? No, not here, that allows investors to actually see what percentage of their investments go into certain types of companies that they may not want their money to go to. Right? So this with APIs, with open banking, with the general opening up of the market, a lot of data can be extracted from there. So my point here is that startups need to be very, very sensitive and need to listen to the customers and listen to the market so that we can continue to serve the market. And especially in this case, when it comes to ethics, we can make sure that we're on point in that regard.
And Umar, maybe lastly, I want to add one more question. With the rise of digital platforms, how might e-commerce and online strategy marketing, so we can say, evolve to meet the needs of ethical consumers in the Southeast Asia market?
All right. Personally, our view is that the approach to marketing today is generally not too sustainable. Here specifically, I'm referring to spending on ads, on big media, big social media platforms, search engines, and so on. A lot of money goes there. Whereas when it comes to, for example, in this case, ethical consumerism, it is a very community-based thing, right? So my view and what we propagate is that it should be focused on networks, communities, collaborations, and partnerships. Instead, over just throwing money at ads to get traction, right? So this is a much more targeted, sustainable way, because it can potentially create what is called a network effect, where word of mouth builds up and snowballs, and more people come together because they feel connected to what you are doing and they want to be part of it. Right? So this is what we see as the opportunity for startups today. Instead of just doing the traditional or typical kind of ads expenditure.
All right, again, I will say thank you very much to our guest, Umar Munshi, the managing partner, HASAN.VC, for helping us understand from the perspective of accelerator programs on how they boost the startup entrepreneurs, especially, and how can they balance between revenue pressures with ethical integrity in the future. And definitely that is the main aspect that we are focusing on. And again, I will say thank you very much, Umar, and I hope to see you again. And definitely all of our discussion here will be featured in AWANI.com and across all social media platforms.